So you're watching Sky News and the press preview. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Michael Heaver and Kate Williams. But let's look at those front pages first of all. Well, May tells EU, get on with Brexit. That's the Express's take on the Prime Minister's warning to other leaders that she'll walk away from any deal she can't defend to the country. The FT shows Mrs May with the German and French leaders in Brussels, urging them to help her move the negotiations forward. The Times reports that Brexit Secretary David Davis is now drawing up plans for the possibility of a no-deal exit. The Telegraph pictures the PM in Brussels, but leads on a warning from Citizens Advice that millions of people are being routinely overcharged for using their mobile phones. The Mirror leads on claims by Rod Stewart's wife, Penny Lancaster, that she was drugged and sexually assaulted by a designer when she was a young model. And that story is also the lead in the Daily Star. London's Metro leads on the latest crime figures, with violent offences up 19% and the police blaming cuts in funding and numbers. The Guardian analyses data which shows that 1 in 3 Oxford colleges took no black students in 2015. The Eye reports that the Scottish Government is to ban the smacking of children and says children's commissioners are demanding that the rest of the UK does the same. The Daily Mail says that an official watchdog has accused Mary Stopes clinics of paying bonuses to staff who encourage women to have abortions. The clinic has responded, saying it is categorically untrue. And finally, The Sun has a story about police officers wearing blue nail varnish. That's to highlight the problem of slavery, the victims of which often work in nail bars. Well, Michael and Kate with me to take us through their selection of the newspapers. We're going to start with that story in The Guardian that we mentioned, the front page of The Guardian, about the lack of black candidates finding success when applying, or if they do at all, apply to Oxbridge.
Yes, it's nearly a third of Oxford colleges failed to admit a single black British A-level student in 2015. You know, quite a shocking statistic. I think a big aspect of this is actually class and that sort of culture of the Oxbridge being a sort of bastion of privilege, very isolated from working class people, especially in people from all different backgrounds. But, you know, for me, David Lammy here, he notes that almost 400 black students every year get 3 A's at A-level. The fact that it's not that people aren't getting the grades, it's the fact that Oxbridge is perceived to be this bastion of privilege that's very foreign, that they don't really think is for them. And that's really what's got to change in this country. And I think a big part of this, we've seen in the inner cities, a lot of discipline breakdown, a lot of bad state schools. I mean, I myself grew up in Cambridge, went to a failing state school. Even coming from Cambridge and living in Cambridge, you can feel very disconnected and like these routes, even if you can get the grades, they're not necessarily for you, they're not accessible to you, they're quite intimidating actually. And, and that's what's got to change in our society. And I think part of this is actually grammar schools. I think that would, for working class kids, that would actually give them more of a mindset that I'm someone that can go to Oxbridge, it is for me, and it's not such a foreign, isolated concept. I think that's something we've really got to look at. So,
okay, it's not necessarily about the people not getting the grades or even being refused, it's that they're not applying? Is that what the story is?
I mean, obviously the story, we have the statistics David Lammy said about, this was at his behest, he was asking for this information. Of course, the first black Briton to attend Harvard Law School himself, and he said that he said that 3 A's at A-level, 400 students, they're not attracted to Oxbridge. They feel, and perhaps they come from, lots of people come from schools in which there's a tradition. If you've seen people from your school go every year, it's going to make it more likely to feel, I might give that a try as well, I might just have a go. And there is often a perception that it's much more expensive there, whereas the fees are the same. And in fact, actually, Oxford and Cambridge, because they are quite wealthy institutions, actually often do have more money to help disadvantaged students. They have more money to give bursaries than other universities might do, and they have subsidised accommodation. But I think that a lot of work has been put in this country into education, into inner city education, and increasingly really good results are coming out of there. And the next question is how we get these kids who are getting these amazing results to push them into the best universities, to be the lawyers, the politicians, the doctors, the people who are going to sort of be the big names in future Britain. And I mean, For me, grammar schools is a big question, because the problem is when you start a grammar school at 11, a lot of kids who are getting to the grammar school already, they'll have had tutors. It's quite hard to find. If we have grammar schools, I think we need to have an exam which you can't be coached for and you can't be tutored for, that working class children can go into it in the same level playing field.
But they say that there are exams that you can't be tutored for, but people always do. If you really want your child to get in, you probably will find a tutor that can help.
I put the grammar schools in areas where there aren't really middle class people. I put them in the most deprived areas of the country where you've got real social deprivation. No one's ever gone to Oxbridge, and there are no middle class people, so you don't have that disadvantage. And I do think that's
I think you're right if that's what the government's going to do, because rather than putting them all in Sevenoaks and Tunbridge Wells, where you already have them, and there are lots of conservative.
And should the onus be on the schools to prepare students and broaden their horizons and allow them to know that this is an option for you, or should the onus be on the universities to have outreach programmes?
It's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, look, Oxbridge isn't for everyone. The academic route isn't for everyone, and we have to remember that as a country. I think we put far, far, far too much onus on going down that academic route. I would actually have, for instance, vocational schools that you had to also do tests to go into, because I know lots of clever academic people who couldn't change a tyre, or change a light bulb, frankly. So the way we look at this, you only do tests for academic, I actually think is wrong. I think, at the end of the day, education should be about one thing. It should be about finding what children are best at, what they're passionate about, what they want to do, and giving them the best tools possible to do that, whether that's academic, whether it's vocational, whether it's anything else. And just a final interesting aspect of the story that I think is very important is the geographical aspect. The new figures also showed that disadvantaged regions of Wales and the northwest of England have largely missed out on efforts by the two universities to widen admissions as well. And, again, largely it's students from the south of England who are getting into these. So it's,
London and the south.
It's the rich areas, it's the areas which generally have better schools, and I think really that's
parents who are going to go the extra mile because they have the extra money. And
big cultural aspect.
I do think this is a good start for research, and I think we need more research. And I think what would be great now is to talk to these students who are getting these brilliant results and saying, did you apply or didn't you want to apply? And if they are applying and not getting into the elite universities, because obviously it's not just Oxbridge, there are many brilliant universities across the country, are they getting in? If they're not getting in, we really need to think very carefully about what we do.
And a lot of it is about demystifying these institutions. I mean, they are historical institutions that people look up to. But I don't know if you remember, a while back at Cambridge University, they had that campaign with all the black students that were at the university, just to show that actually there are black students here and they're thriving and they love it. So it's about perception and demystifying. Let's move on to the Metro. This is about the stats on violent crime.
Yeah, some very, very worrying numbers out today. I mean, we've seen police cuts in this country, and I think you're now starting to see the result of that. Knife crime up 26%. Firearms up 27%. I also looked at these figures myself. Shotgun offences, for instance, are up 53%, and this is just year on year. So this isn't, these are statistically significant surges in crime. We've obviously seen things like horrendous acid attacks, spates of knife killings. I think it's 35 people under the age of 25 in London in the past 12 months have been murdered. I mean, to me, this cannot be ignored, and I would like to see a bit more outrage from politicians, actually, because I think our inner cities, Birmingham, Manchester, London, we are seeing an epidemic now, especially among young boys when it comes to knife crime, gun crime. Far too many are being injured, attacked, the gangs are running rampant, and I think a lot of it, again, is policing. How often now do in a lot of these working class areas, these rough areas, do you actually see police walking down the streets patrolling day to day? You simply
well, that's what the police are saying themselves, because of the cuts.
And I'm afraid you cannot do law and order on the cheap. As soon as you start to make cuts, this is what happens.
And I think also there is the point here of the increased crimes of harassment and stalking. And I do think, we'll talk about this a bit later, about Penny Lancaster and the whole Me Too social media discussion that's been this week. People are reporting these crimes of sexual harassment and stalking in a way they wouldn't have done 4 or 5 years ago, because they felt that there's no point, no one's going to believe them. So I think we can see a positive. It may not, in some cases, this crime, it may not be that it's actually rising, but people are actually saying, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to actually report this, and I'm going to put the police onto these stalkers, onto these people who abuse and exploit me as well. So I think that's the most important.
Yes, and Office for National Statistics are saying that there's better recording of crime being reported. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in the figures. But conversely, let's have a look at what the police are doing on the front of the Sun newspaper. I had to read into this story because at first glance it's a little bit odd. Explain.
Yeah, policemen basically painting their nails, a gimmick some are calling it, to highlight slavery. I've seen a lot of this on social media. There's a lot of police, I don't know, I guess they call it outreach or stuff now. They're doing these sort of weird, zany type gimmicky things. I think there's been a lot of criticism, because going back to the last story, we do hear a lot about the police saying, look, we haven't got the resources, we're facing cuts. When people see, however well-intentioned, when people see policemen doing this type of thing, and I've seen a number of different tweets of this types of campaigns, of videos and things like that, they're sort of wondering, well, have you really got time to be doing that? Shouldn't you be out catching the criminals? Yeah, I think it sends the wrong message. At a time when the police are saying our budgets are being stretched, we don't have enough manpower, we don't have enough man hours to properly police the streets, I think this does send out quite a bad message that actually the police are sitting around playing their nails, which we know they're not. We know that a lot of them are going out there and defending.
But isn't the intention good? They're trying to highlight slavery and that people are being exploited in nail bars.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a good look.
I'm very supportive of this. I mean, I think that this is. I mean, I have to say, this gentleman here, it's probably taken him about 5 seconds to paint those nails. I've seen better manicures. And I think that we've seen a lot of coverage of slavery in Britain, trafficking in Britain, and nail bars, they are across the country. They're in all sorts of high streets, and I think people go in, they use them, and there has been a lot of media coverage. There was a huge Sunday Times story about nail bars, and yet we still keep using them. And I think the police are saying, think carefully. These people in nail bars, they might be smiling when you go in and give you a manicure for £10, but they may have been trafficked. And I think if people, I think it actually is it is a really good initiative. And I think we obviously aren't. We are letting this carry on and being blind to it. And if this is going to open our eyes, it's good.
I don't think the onus should be on the public to worry about who's painting their nails. The onus should be on the police to go and arrest these thugs and make sure this isn't going on. And I think I'd like to see a video of them lining up a few of these people saying, oh, I've just been to this nail bar, we've nicked all these people, we've been trafficking people about. I think that's a far more positive message of proactive policing rather than this, which is a bit silly, I think.
You're going to agree to disagree on that. Michael and Kate, stay with us. We are going to take a break. Still to come. When are we over the hill? According to 50-year-olds, it's a very specific age. Stay tuned to find out what it is. None of us are over the hill yet, I don't think. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, Michael Heaver, and Kate Williams, to take us through their selection. We're going to have a look at the Times, page 2, which is talking about our diesel fumes being amongst the most toxic in the West.
Yes, there's a few papers today leading on pollution. It's in the inside of the Times, on the front of the Guardian, really saying that despite a lot of the advances we've had in many countries, including Britain, but also America and Japan, we are really weighing against those advances that we've had in public health and smoking and in healthy eating with the level of pollution that we have, particularly in cities. So this is mainly car pollution. This is mainly pollution but also from business as well. But it is toxic traffic is the one that is causing the biggest problem. And it's saying that 50,000 people dying every year during toxic pollution. And that really is going to rise. But I mean, we've seen some very interesting initiatives. Oxford, I think, is banning diesel and petrol cars in 2030. Paris banning it for maybe 2045. The government's put more money into electric cars. But I think 50 years hence, people are going to look back on our cities and think they were very polluted places, particularly for the elderly and, of course, for children. And we remember that children walk up and down these streets and they are on the same level as the exhaust
And also
pipes.
in comparison to other countries, Britain's twice as likely to die from pollution as people in Sweden, New Zealand, Australia, Canada and Ireland.
Yeah, well, I'm stuffed reading this because I live next to a main road and a tube station.
Avocados every day for you.
It ain't good reading for me. But I mean, I wonder if part of this is the sheer congestion now that we've seen in a lot of the big cities, and obviously population growth with the UK, with mass migration, things like that. I mean, the last figures we had, it was over 500,000 a year, I think, 538,000 population increase in a year. You know, that's a lot of cars on the road. That's a lot of people needing trains, and it adds up to things like this.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder if this is the next asbestos, where in 20, 30, 40 years' time, we're going to be looking, thinking, God, these are serious health implications, having so many people packed in to relatively small areas in big cities.
Yeah, no consequence of progress, I suppose, and development. We can't get away without mentioning Brexit, obviously. We're going to have a look at the front page of the Times. I'll just get it up for you there. This is David Davis basically considering, or perhaps openly for the first time, really considering a no deal. What happens?
Well, David Davis has obviously gone to Brussels. He's our man on the front line for Britain. If he's planning for a no deal now, I'd suggest that's quite a serious possibility. It's the first time really we've seen David Davis talk about this and plan for this in such a way. Halloween Fright Night, I think, is planned with the Cabinet. Amber Rudd, don't forget, around the Cabinet table, Home Secretary's described no deal as unthinkable. Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, another Remainer around the Cabinet table, has described it, has talked about how he's not going to sort of fund no deal until the last possible moment.
I think Jeremy Corbyn saying today as well it would be a complete disaster.
John McDonnell saying the same.
Well, I mean, the Labour position is very odd. The Labour position is basically, if they were in government, they would go in and say to the EU, well, we're not going to walk out. So presumably they would either accept whatever the EU offers or cancel Brexit, presumably, which would be ridiculous. But I think, look, any sensible government now, it's clearly a possibility there could be a no deal. Any sensible government needs to now invest in that outcome. And if we get a deal, great. But we now must presume there's not going to be a deal, and we need to see significant investment in the next budget, billions of pounds put into this now.
And we have not got long, because essentially we have a year. And if we say the MPs are going to go on holiday next summer for their summer holiday, we really haven't got very long, because by October we need to be completely sure on what we're doing, because it has to be ratified by all the EU parliaments before the following March. And this is really very concerning. And I think what we need, if this is going to be a possibility, we need all the research to be out there. The government's had these research papers made about whether or not what the effect of no deal was going to be and what the effect of Brexit was going to be on all sorts of industries. We need those to be published and put out there. And the industry, if this is even a possibility, which is to me a big disaster, the industries that are going to be most hit by it, for example, lamb imports, there'll be a 40% WTO tariff on lamb. The whole question of manufacturing, Nissan, of course, they get 5 million parts in every day. If there's a minute of disruption to the supply chain, that's going to compromise the whole working of Nissan, 40,000 jobs, and Euratom and security. We need these papers to be published so we know exactly where we're standing. And we also need, if there's going to be no deal, it to be costed. So we say to ourselves, is it better just to pay the EU bill, 60 billion if that's what they're asking for, more or less, against maybe 500 billion on a no deal? And
no, serious questions to be answered and lots of weighing up to be done. Let's move on to the Mirror, and this is a very brave move of Penny Lancaster there, following on from the Weinstein allegation. She's speaking out about a sex attack that she had to endure when she was a young model.
Well, this is very moving, and Miss Lancaster's been very brave. She's on the front of a lot of papers, and really this has been a real outpouring over the last 2 weeks of the Me Too, the Alyssa Milano. She tweeted, I've been sexually assaulted, if you have to, tweet Me Too. And you see so many women and men. Tom Jones has come out and said he too was abused when he was starting out in the industry, talking about the abuse they've suffered. And I really think it's obviously unbelievable levels of abuse people have suffered, and obviously it's mainly been in fashion, in cinema, in music, but this is across the board. It's in all kinds of industries. Wherever there is power and structures of power, it can be abused. And it really, I just feel so much respect for these women and men who've come out and said this, because by saying this, by speaking up, hopefully we will see a sea change, and in the future that our children can be safe, whatever job they choose to be, whether they choose to be actors or whether they choose to be models. And you think of people like Terry Richardson, the very celebrated photographer, who basically made it clear in, I think, 2007. He said, it's not who you know in this industry for models, it's whether or not you let me abuse you sexually.
But we hope that this light shone now on Hollywood and actually all industries states across the board, that it will lead to a real
sea change. And people, and because these people it often happens to the young starting out in their career, and very young teenagers suffering like this, and it is absolutely horrific they've suffered this way.
Just have to quickly fit in this last story. This is on the Mail, and it's really when life begins.
Yeah, when over 50s asked what they really think of someone who's old, they're saying 83 is the magic number. 83 is old. I think that's, I guessed that bang on the money earlier.
Yeah, you did.
It's one of those things, isn't it? When you go through life, the older you get, your sort of outlook changes on it.
People said 83 years old, and you said, I guess. I know exactly who said that.
We've all three of us got a bit of a way to go, I think, to get there. I'll get there before you, but yes, we've still got time. Thank you very much for speaking to us this evening and take us through the papers, Kate and Michael. Thank you very much. Let's see what's happening with the weather now.